Hey folks, welcome back to Truth Be Told Paranormal. You know, we talk about a lot of crazy stuff on here. Aliens, Bigfoot, DMT, you name it. But today we're diving into something even wilder. The world of false prophets, man. These are the dudes and dudettes who've convinced masses of people to buy into their often dangerous and always bizarre belief systems. We'll be getting into some seriously messed up stories, folks. We're talking about cults, mass suicides, government standoffs, the whole 9 yards. It's going to be wild, it's going to be intense, and it's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about human nature. So buckle up, grab your favorite beverage, and get ready for a wild ride. We're about to unravel the mysteries behind some of history's most infamous false prophets. Let's get it on. So, first up, we got Jim Jones. This guy is like the poster child for charismatic cult leaders. He was born in Indiana back in 1931, and man, his childhood sounds like something out of a psychological thriller. I mean, we're talking about a kid who was obsessed with death, held funerals for animals, and was reportedly fascinated by Hitler. Now, some folks say this was all a sign of things to come, that he was destined to become the monster he eventually became. But you know, it's never that simple, is it? I mean, was he born evil? Or did life just kind of push him in that direction? Whatever the case, Jones eventually found his calling, or at least what he thought was his calling, in religion. He started preaching in the 50s, and man, this dude could talk. He had this way of captivating an audience, of speaking to their deepest fears and desires. He preached a message of love, equality, and social justice, which resonated with a lot of people, especially those who felt marginalized and disenfranchised. He started his own church, the People's Temple, and it just blew up. Now, Jones was a master manipulator. There's no doubt about that. He knew how to push people's buttons, how to exploit their weaknesses and insecurities. He created this environment in his church where he was the ultimate authority, the only one with all the answers. He started demanding absolute loyalty from his followers, isolating them from their families and friends. He controlled every aspect of their lives, where they lived, what they ate, who they could talk to. It was like he was building his own little empire, brick by crazy brick. And the craziest part? People just went along with it. They believed everything he said, no matter how outlandish it got. They trusted him with their lives, literally. It's easy to judge, to say we'd never fall for something like that. But you gotta remember, these people were looking for something, for meaning, for belonging. And Jones, he offered them that, or at least the illusion of it. But even with all the control, the cracks were starting to show. Jones, he was getting more and more paranoid, more and more unhinged. He started talking about government conspiracies, about the need to escape the evils of the outside world. He started talking about revolutionary suicide, about how dying together was the only way to truly be free. And man, that's when things took a seriously dark turn. He moved his entire congregation to this remote settlement in Guyana called Jonestown. It was supposed to be a utopia, a paradise free from the corruption of the outside world. But in reality, it was anything but. It was more like a prison camp, with Jones as the warden. People were overworked, underfed, and living in fear. Dissent was not tolerated, and punishments were brutal. And yet, even then, many still clung to the belief that Jones was their savior, that he knew what was best for them. It's a terrifying example of how powerful belief can be, even when it's clearly misplaced. Alright, so after the insanity of Jonestown, you'd think people would be a little more skeptical of self-proclaimed prophets, right? Well, that's where David Koresh comes in. This dude, born Vernon Howell, managed to create his own brand of crazy right here in the good old US of A. See, Koresh was a high school dropout from Texas who got really into religion, specifically the Bible. He joined this group called the Branch Davidians, a splinter group of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, these guys were already a little out there, but Koresh, he took it to a whole other level. He was charismatic like Jones, and he had this way of interpreting scripture that really resonated with some folks. He claimed to be a prophet, even the reincarnation of Christ himself. And you know what? People bought it. They flocked to his compound near Waco, Texas. Drawn in by his teachings and his promises of spiritual enlightenment, But Koresh's teachings weren't all peace and love, man. Oh no, this dude was obsessed with the Book of Revelation, the one with all the fire and brimstone and the 4 horsemen. He believed the apocalypse was coming, and that he and his followers were the chosen ones, destined to survive the tribulation and usher in a new era. Now, apocalyptic thinking, it's nothing new. People have been predicting the end of the world since, well, forever. But Koresh, he took it a step further. He started stockpiling weapons, claiming they were necessary to defend themselves against the forces of evil when the end times came. He instilled a siege mentality in his followers, preparing them for a final showdown with the outside world. And this, my friends, is where things get really messy. Because once you convince people that the end is nigh, that they're living in the last days, it's amazing what you can get them to do. One of the most disturbing aspects of Koresh's teachings was his twisted interpretation of marriage and family. He believed in polygamy, but not just any kind of polygamy. He claimed to be the only one worthy of having children, and he took multiple wives, some of them as young as 12 years old. He justified this by saying he was fulfilling biblical prophecy, that he was creating a special lineage of God's chosen people. But let's call it what it was: abuse of power, plain and simple. He used his position as a prophet to manipulate and exploit his followers, to satisfy his own desires. And the saddest part is that many of his followers, especially the women, genuinely believed they were doing God's will by submitting to him. Alright, so we've talked about Jim Jones and David Koresh, 2 seriously intense dudes, right? Well, buckle up, because Marshall Applewhite and his Heaven's Gate group, man, they're a whole other trip. Applewhite, he wasn't your typical cult leader. This guy was a different breed. He believed humans were just a stepping stone in evolution, and he wasn't talking about some Darwinian slow burn either. This dude thought aliens, and I mean actual extraterrestrials, were out there way ahead of us on the evolutionary ladder. He called them the evolutionary level above human, or ELO for short. Catchy, right? See, Applewhite believed these ELO had visited Earth before, dropping off some knowledge and then peacing out. And get this, he thought Jesus was one of them. Yeah, you heard that right. Jesus, an alien. He claimed that Jesus was sent to show humanity the way to evolve beyond our physical bodies and join these super beings in some other dimension. And Applewhite, he was convinced he was the second coming of Jesus, here to finish the job. Talk about a God complex, am I right? But here's the thing. People bought it, man. They left their lives, their families, everything to follow this dude. So Applewhite starts preaching this wild stuff in the 70s, traveling around, picking up followers. He called them his crew. They lived a super disciplined life, man, no joke. They were all about that minimalist life, renounced all their possessions, wore matching uniforms, even went as far as castrating themselves. They believed it would help them shed their earthly desires and prepare for the next level of existence. Now this is where things get really weird. In 1997, the Hale-Bopp comet shows up, blazing across the sky. Applewhite, he sees this as the sign, man. He convinces his followers that a spaceship is tailing the comet, and it's their ticket out of here. This was their chance to shed their human forms, their containers as they called them, and be reborn as these advanced beings on another planet. He told them they had to leave Earth, to board this spaceship, and ascend to a higher level of existence. The catch? They had to die to get there. It's chilling, man, the hold this guy had on people. They truly believed him. So picture this. Rancho Santa Fe, California, this luxurious mansion. Inside, 39 people, including Applewhite, are dead. They took their own lives, man. They believed they were graduating to a higher level of existence. Hitching a ride on a spaceship they thought was trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. They even wore matching black tracksuits and Nike sneakers, like some kind of bizarre uniform for their cosmic journey. The Heaven's Gate tragedy, man, it's a stark reminder of the power of belief and the dangerous grip a charismatic leader can have. These weren't stupid people. They were just looking for answers, for something to believe in. But Applewhite's twisted teachings led them down a path of no return. It's a story that sends chills down your spine, man. It makes you question everything, you know? What are we capable of believing? How far are we willing to go for our beliefs? It's heavy stuff, man. So we're going deep down the rabbit hole here, man. Charles Manson. This guy wasn't just a cult leader, he was a straight-up boogeyman. Manson and his family, as they called themselves, were like something out of a bad acid trip. They were all about peace and love on the surface, but underneath it was all darkness and chaos. They set up shop at this place called Spawn Ranch, an old movie set out in the California desert. It was like the Wild West out there, man. Manson used that isolation to his advantage. He controlled everything that went on out there. He controlled what they ate, what they wore, what they thought. It was total mind control. And this is where it gets really crazy. Manson starts talking about this thing he calls helter-skelter. He believed a race war was coming, and he was convinced he was chosen to lead his followers to safety. Manson managed to convince his followers to commit some truly horrific acts in the name of helter-skelter. The Tate LaBianca murders, the sheer brutality of those murders shocked the nation. Manson and his followers were eventually caught, but not before they left a trail of blood and terror in their wake. He represented the end of the peace and love generation. Even though he was locked up, Manson continued to exert a strange hold over people. He became a pop culture icon, a morbid fascination for millions. Now let's talk about Shoko Asahara, the dude behind the Aum Shinrikyo cult in Japan. Talk about a trip. This guy was another level of crazy. Asahara started out as this yoga instructor, right? He was all about enlightenment and achieving a higher state of consciousness. But then things took a dark turn, man. He started incorporating all these apocalyptic prophecies into his teachings, claiming he was some kind of reincarnation of Buddha. He starts talking about this coming apocalypse, about a final war between good and evil. Classic cult leader stuff, right? But here's the thing. Asahara had a plan. He wasn't just going to wait for the end of the world. He was going to bring it about himself. Remember those sarin gas attacks in Tokyo? Yeah, that was Aum Shinrikyo. It's insane, right? They released this deadly nerve gas in the Tokyo subway, man. People were just going about their day, and then boom, chaos. People dropping dead on the platforms, choking, convulsing. It was a horrific attack. The world watched in horror as the news unfolded. Asahara and his top lieutenants were eventually captured, but the damage was done. The Aum Shinrikyo attack showed the world just how dangerous these cults could be. They weren't just harmless weirdos. They were a real threat. The Japanese government cracked down hard on Aum Shinrikyo after the attacks, but the fear lingered. It's like, how do you stop people from falling for this stuff? It's a question we're still grappling with today. Man, we've gone deep on some seriously dark stuff today. These stories are a trip, but they're also a cautionary tale, you know? It's a reminder that we need to be vigilant, to question everything, and to be careful who we trust. If this deep dive into the world of false prophets blew your mind, hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. We've got a lot more crazy stories to share, so stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, stay woke, my friends. Man, we've gone deep on some dark stuff today. Stay woke, my friends.